What historical mystery is unlikely to ever be solved? What Pope Leo said to Attila the Hun. Attila was taking over the world and made it to Rome and the Vatican. Leo rode out alone and spoke to Attila, and convinced Attila to not destroy Rome and the Vatican. What was said, only the archives of the Vatican has any idea. I never thought about it that way. The real identity of Jack the Ripper. It was Laszlo Kravensworth. For me, it has to be Aaron Kosminski. Actual criminal profilers got together, reviewed the case and the suspects, and said it was him. He lived close to all of the locations, including one other similar case years before which also went unsolved, and isn't part of the canonical five. Further, his family suspected him, had him locked up after the fifth murder, and no more were committed. They told Scotland Yard of their suspicions, and he was interviewed by them. He confessed and they considered the case wrapped up, so why not reveal the truth at the time? Kosminski was a Polish immigrant, and there were many of them in London at the time. If the identity of Jack the Ripper was revealed at the time, there would have been race riots and massive anti-immigrant sentiment. That would never happen in London, and would generally cause too much civil unrest. But apparently Scotland Yard has always known. Shrugs, that's what I read. Anyway, I want it to be solved, but it's seemingly more and more unlikely each day. D.B. Cooper. Something people don't realize either is that D.B. Cooper landed in the area where Mount St. Helens erupted. If there was any physical evidence, including his remains, they could very well have been destroyed 9 years after the hijacking. The exact burial site of Genghis Khan. I watched a documentary about this on CuriosityStream a little while back. There is a good possibility that Genghis Khan and a handful of his descendants were buried under a mound at the top of his favorite mountain, Birkenkelden. He sheltered on that mountain after he had to run away as a child, and he declared it sacred. To this day you need special permission by the government to even get close to it. It was very interesting. What caused the Bronze Age collapse? Probably oxidization. Who are the Sea People? I have read a pretty convincing theory that they were likely the Greeks. The theory posits that the Mycenaean civilization collapsed first, and the Greek peoples of the region, who would have been more advanced in seafaring technology than the other Mediterranean cultures, leaned towards piracy and began attacking the other Bronze Age civilizations in the region. The murder of Olof Palme. The official version does not have any real evidence or any murder weapon. Whether Frank Morris, John Englund, and his brother Clarence Englund survived their escape from Alcatraz federal prison. Some Dutch scientists tried it with a day similar go that of the escape, weather, water patterns, etc. Same style of reft and so on. They got very close, but said, if we had an adrenaline rush of escaping prison and becoming free, then we would have gotten to the coast. The History Channel has a great documentary about this. The two brothers' families claim they survived by tying a rope onto a boat and holding on, which they used to do for fun as kids. Their friend claims he took them to Mexico and they lived to old age there with families and everything. They even offer evidence, Christmas cards they received, and even a photo of them old. I am convinced it's true. One of Australia's prime ministers just disappeared when he went for a swim in the ocean, so probably that. Did not they then name a swimming pool after him? National Aquatic Center for leaders who can't swim good. Whatever happened to the Sodder children? There are too many unsolved cases involving children. The Beaumont children are the main ones in Australia, though a few years later two young girls were kidnapped from Adelaide Oval, possibly by the same person, though we never know for sure. The most likely suspect is dead. The Bronze Age collapse, where would they all go? All my homies. There was a Throughline episode about this. Best theories point to massive droughts and famine followed by collapse of trade networks. When people could no longer trade for food, they took it. Large governments and anyone keeping records stopped recording. Also, like that other guy said, no trade, no tin, no bronze. Eventually someone figured out how to make iron into weapons and formed new kingdoms. My neighbor killed his whole family, buried them in his house, then went for a trip. Nobody knows if he is dead or hiding somewhere, and if so, where. The police kind of screwed up the start of the investigation, so he had a good head start on them. His name is, or maybe was, Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès, and he was since then featured in multiple TV shows and books. The fate of the Mary Celeste's crew. The identity of the Isdal woman. I am currently obsessed with reading about the Talland men. Yes, evidently he was a human sacrifice, but his insanely well-preserved face looks so happy and at peace. Where Attila the Hun is buried. Him and Genghis Khan are unlikely to ever be found. Nomadic tribes didn't exactly mark burial places. But Genghis Khan had a lot of treasure buried with him, so it would be awesome to find it. The disappearance of MH370. Even if they do find the plane or what's left of it, it's been so long that the black box won't be any use to anybody, so we will never really know for sure what happened. There is actually a decent amount of evidence that points to the pilot deliberately crashing the plane. The Atlantic wrote a really great piece on it. What happened to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum paintings? The sheer audacity of those two men who pulled off that heist is impressive. The museum still offers a $10 million reward for info leading to finding the pieces and the culprits. Rasputin, even if he took the king's son off his aspirin to help his hemophilia, how did he know to do that? How did he even get so close with the royal family without anyone raising an eyebrow until it became completely public? Did Tsar Nicholas' advisories see nothing wrong with a homeless wizard being associated with the Tsar? How did he really die, or how did he live the shot and poison? If that story's true, just so many questions lost to time. Einstein's last words, nobody knows what they were, because the nurse taking care of him didn't speak German. Big lack of foresight there. John Bennett Ramsey. Best theory I have heard is that her brother killed her, and the parents are covering to protect him. The missing minutes of the Watergate tapes. What happened during that time? That's a good one, because given that plenty of incredibly damning stuff did come out, it either has to be an innocent mistake or something really bad. Where the hell these extra Tupperware lids come from? I am going to go in a much different direction and say what the origin of language was like. We obviously don't know anything that isn't written down, and relatively speaking, that time period is quite recent. We can probably get an estimation of which points grunts became words just by looking at biology, if we are lucky enough to have a well-preserved specimen. But we will never know what the first full set of words sounded like. The guy in a Max Headroom mask that hijacked a Doctor Who broadcast in, I believe, Chicago in the 80s, to this day no one knows who it is. There was a great thread a few years back from a guy who thought he knew the people who did it. He eventually got in touch with them, and they claimed they didn't. But you do have to wonder. Also, the Doctor Who hijack was their second attempt. They initially hacked into the signal during the evening news, but there was no sound and station technicians blocked them out after a few seconds. Late at night, when there were no technicians on duty, they tried again more successfully. It's not a huge mystery, but I would be fascinated what the liberation of Auschwitz did to the mental health of the Soviet soldiers who liberated it. I have seen some stuff on Americans who liberated much smaller camps, but just the thought of what it must have done to discover the biggest one. My grandfather had so much PTSD from the war and liberating Buchenwald that he drank himself into an early grave when my mom was still in high school. I would imagine plenty of Red Army vets did the same. Spring-Heeled Jack, the Holy Grail, where the Jesus tomb is, who is Julius Caesar's son is. I only just recently learned about the huge Christian population in Ethiopia, and they claim they have the Holy Grail. If you have not read about that, look into it's quite interesting and possibly plausible. I have made this post before, but I will make it again. Identity of Somerton Man, Tamim Shud, or Somerton Man. Just really bizarre and creepy. It's got an X-Files vibe to it. Well-dressed, athletic guy is found dead leaning against a seawall on an Australian beach. No cause of death is discovered despite autopsy. No ID, no labels on any of his clothes. Nothing to identify him but a scrap of printed paper saying Tamim Shud found in his pocket. No one is reported missing. Later, a briefcase is found in a locker at a train station attributed to him, with a few clothes marked T. Keen. No one named that is found missing. When the info about the note is released, one of the locals finds an odd book in the backseat of his car in the area that the man died in. The piece of paper matches the torn-out bit in the book. In the book there is a very odd cipher that no one has been able to decode since and a phone number. Blood pooling in the body suggests he didn't die with his head propped against the wall as he was found. Half-smoked cigarette found fallen out of his mouth, but if he died in a different position, would be a little odd. Body was embalmed and put on display for 6 months, and received a lot of attention, but no one can remember having seen him. No family or anyone knowing him have ever been found. Tamam Shud roughly means the end times. Who really was the man in the iron mask? The king's twin brother. Did not you see the documentary with Leo DiCaprio? The Vatican Library, an estimated 40-mile shelf space of priceless ancient documents that the church has amassed over the last 1,000 years or so, most of which the world will never see or learn about. Large amounts of the documents are available to scholars, but they only let small numbers in per day. The actual number of documents that are not available to the public is pretty small. I think it's very telling that a large number of documents after 1922 are still sealed. Thanks for watching. Share your story in the comment.